The students in this school call me an angel, but they have no idea I'm the heir to Korea's deadliest crime syndicate. For 10 years, I lived a lie. I spent every day helping old ladies and wearing a smile that felt like a mask, all for one girl, Soin. She told me she wanted a kind man, so I buried the monster inside me to become her perfect, good boy. I won awards for kindness, while my family was winning wars in the underworld. But 10 years of acting like a saint evaporated in a single second. I found out Soin wasn't just ignoring me. She was dating the school's most pathetic bully, Hyuntae. And her reason? I tried dating good guys. They're boring. I'm attracted to bad boys now. That was the moment the angel died. If she wants a bad boy, if she wants someone who isn't boring, then I'm done playing pretend. I walked home and pushed open my front gates. Immediately, 2 rows of professional hitmen bowed until their foreheads hit the concrete. "Welcome home, young master," they roared. I'm going back to that school to show Soin exactly what a real bad boy looks like. And I'm starting by breaking her boyfriend's world into pieces. But before the monster woke up, I was living a very different kind of lie. My name is Junho. My daily routine used to involve helping old ladies on the highway while wearing a smile that screamed, "I've never had a dark thought in my life." On my way to school, I heard a scream echoing from an alley. Naturally, my good boy radar went off. I walked in to find this broccoli-headed final boss, Hyuntae, surrounded by his goons. They were busy playing a game of, let's see how much trauma we can give this random kid. He was literally stepping on the poor kid's head. He held up a photo and started mocking the kid for having no mother, threatening to sell the photo or rip it to shreds. The victim was covered in bruises, begging for the one thing he had left. My blood was boiling. My internal monologue was screaming for me to paint the walls with this guy's face. But I had a reputation to maintain. I had to be the angel. I kept my cool, even as my veins were popping out of my forehead like a roadmap. I asked for the price. This clown had the audacity to ask for 10,000 won. I reached into my pocket, pulled out 2 5,000 won bills, and handed them over. The bully laughed, calling it a fair trade, while mocking me for being a charity angel. He even joked about how I used to buy 100 loaves of bread for people. Yeah, hilarious. The kid I saved was practically crying tears of joy, calling me a celestial being. I just laughed it off, asking him if I really looked that kind. He told me I was the most famous angel in school. I played along, acting like the happiest guy on earth. But deep down, there was a reason I was trying this hard. I get to school, class 452, and walk in with a wave, like I'm running for Pope. Everyone loves me, especially Han Swen. She's the girl I've spent a decade trying to impress. We were on trash duty together, and as we walked to the bins, she started praising me for helping that kid earlier. I was riding high on the good guy points, thinking I was finally closing the deal. Then, the mood shifted. We ran into Hyuntae again. The second Soin saw him, she turned into a nervous wreck. I thought he was bullying her too. I was ready to call my uncles, and by uncles, I mean high-ranking mobsters, to make him disappear. But she told me to leave first. She told me she'd be fine. I bit my lip, worried they'd hurt her, and walked away like a coward. Because good guys don't pick fights, but curiosity is a poison. I circled back and hid behind a wall. What I saw next felt like a lightning strike to the gut. Soen wasn't being bullied. She was blushing. She was scolding him for acting like they knew each other in public. And Hyuntae was flirting with her, trying to kiss her cheek. They were laughing. They were a couple. I sat in class for the rest of the day, looking like a ghost that just saw its own funeral. My friends asked if I was okay, but I was in a trance. I typed a message to her. I have something to ask, but I couldn't send it. I just wanted it to be a lie. When the bell rang, I didn't go to the PC, bang with the boys. I waited for her. We walked together, and I finally dropped the bomb. "Are you dating Hyuntae?" She didn't even try to hide it. She just giggled and said, "Yeah, I was gonna tell you anyway." I stood there, paralyzed. I flashed back to a rainy afternoon years ago when we were kids. Her dad was a drunk who used to scream through the neighborhood. She was crying on a curb, swearing she'd never marry someone like him. She told me she wanted a man who was kind and sentimental, someone just like me. I've lived my entire life based on that one sentence. I reminded her of that. I told her the guy she's dating is a violent thug, the opposite of what she said she wanted. And do you know what she said? She told me she tried dating good guys, and they were boring. She said she's attracted to bad boys now because they're cool. The irony was so thick, I could choke on it. I grabbed her arm, my voice trembling. I told her, "I'm a bad boy. I'm actually a terrible person." She laughed in my face. She told me I was so kind that I was even trying to act bad just to make her feel better about her choices. I snapped. I started screaming, veins bulging, telling her that the good guy thing was an act. I told her I have the blood of a crime lord in my veins. I offered to show her my first birthday photos, where every guest was a tattooed gangster. I was crying, desperate for her to see the monster I was hiding, and she just patted my head. She told me I was too kind and walked away to meet her boyfriend. I watched them walk off, him putting his arm around her, taking the spot that was supposed to be mine. I stood there alone, 10 years of effort evaporating into nothing. Fine, if she wants a bad boy, if she wants someone who isn't boring, I'll stop playing pretend. I walked home, ripping my tie off like it was a leash. I reached my front gate and pushed it open. Immediately, 2 rows of men in black suits, the kind of guys who make professional hitmen look like choir boys, bowed so low their foreheads almost hit the pavement. "Welcome home, young master," they roared in unison. "The angel of class 452 is dead. It's time to show this school what a real bad boy looks like." The men in black suits were still glued to the floor, waiting for me to give them permission to even breathe. I didn't have time for the formalities. I demanded to know where my uncle was. Apparently, Uncle Yang-soo was inside, probably doing business on the phone. I barged into his office like I owned the place, which, technically, I do, and caught him mid-call. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him I needed his help. I told him I wanted to be a bad person. He actually laughed. Can you believe the nerve? He thought I'd eaten something weird because I've spent my entire existence trying to be the most wholesome human on the planet. I asked him straight up if he was a bad guy. He gave me some philosophical nonsense about being a mix of both, but when I asked about my father, his tone shifted. Total respect. My old man was a legend in the underworld, a hero to his men, but a complete monster to the rest of society. That's exactly what I needed. I told Uncle Yang-soo that the blood of a villain was already in my veins, so he might as well help me tap into it. Uncle Yang-soo noticed the look in my eyes. He said it was the first time I actually looked like my father's son, but he gave me a final warning. 10 years of good boy points were about to go up in smoke. My reputation, my awards, all of it would be trash. I told him I didn't care. The plan was simple. Lesson 1, delete every trace of the angel from my appearance. Hair, clothes, attitude, everything had to go. Uncle Yang-soo was surprisingly hyped about it, telling me to just trust him. But as soon as I smiled, he shut it down. No more smiles. From now on, I had to look like I was perpetually mourning a dead pet or ready to commit a felony. I practiced my serious face, and he gave me the green light. He asked why the sudden change of heart, and I flashed back to that little girl who said she wanted a kind man. That girl was gone. Now, all I could see was her hanging onto that loser Hyuntae. I told my uncle I had a specific jerk I needed to handle. Back in my room, the silence was deafening. I looked at the walls covered in good student awards and kindness certificates. I felt like a fraud. I started doubting if I could actually pull this off. Then, a knock at the door. A group of guys led by a bald dude walked in. Apparently, this guy's nickname back in high school was the Storm of Style. Looking at him, I realized my family's standards for cool were stuck in 2005, but I didn't have a choice. The next morning, I looked in the mirror. I was decked out in an outfit that screamed, "I have a motorcycle, and I don't wear a helmet." I walked to school with my eyebrows narrowed and my eyes wide, trying to look as Mafia as possible. People were whispering everywhere. "Is that Junho?" He didn't even say hi. My mouth was literally itching to greet them back, but I could hear my uncle's voice in my head. "Don't you dare be polite." A girl tried to say hi, and I hit her with the line my uncle taught me. "What are you looking at?" She looked like she was about to cry, and I felt like a piece of trash, but I had to commit. I walked into class and gave the same cold response to everyone. The angel was officially missing in action. Soin was just standing there, looking confused. She eventually came up to me, all smiles, and asked if I wanted to go to the cafeteria. For a split second, the old me wanted to say yes, but then I remembered who she was dating. I told her to go by herself. She got mad, telling me I wasn't acting like myself. I just stopped and told her that was the point. If I'm a different person now, it's because she was the first one to change. I left her standing there in the hallway, stunned. I decided to skip class. My first time ever. I felt like a total rebel, even if I was just wandering around the school grounds like a lost dog. That's when I saw them, a group of delinquents, smoking behind the gym. And of course, the king of the trash heap, Hyuntae, was right in the middle of them. He was with some girl named Leah. They were talking about being bored and wanting to ditch to go eat. The way she was hanging on him, acting all cute and nuzzling up to him, it didn't look like they were just friends. Listen, watching the girl you've simped over for a decade walk away with a human dumpster fire like Hyuntae is one thing, but watching that same dumpster fire try to ignite a second trash pile behind her back? That's where my good guy circuit started to fry, and my Mafia air instincts began to kick in. I followed them, my blood simmering like a pot of cheap ramen left on the stove too long. I kept thinking about Soin. Does she really like this loser? Does she not see the greasy trail of deception he leaves behind? I followed them through back alleys and streets I've never even bothered to look at, my eyes glued to the back of Hyuntae's stupid broccoli head. Eventually, the girl he was with, Leah, started getting suspicious. She's looking around like, hey, where's this legendary noodle shop you promised? All I see are brick walls and bad vibes. Hyuntae didn't even look back at her. He just pointed at this depressing looking building called Lucky Apartments. I mean, name a place Lucky, and it's a 90% guarantee that nothing but misery happens inside. Leah wasn't an idiot. She stopped dead in her tracks, asking why a noodle shop would have a lobby and a mailroom. This clown actually turned around with a grin that made my skin crawl, telling her that his house is the noodle shop. He actually tried the "my parents aren't home" card in the middle of the school day. Real original, Hyuntae. You're a regular Romeo of the slums. Leah backed up, clearly realizing she'd accidentally walked into a horror movie plot. She told him she was out, that they should just go back to the original shop. But Hyuntae's cool guy mask slipped faster than a wet bar of soap. He grabbed her wrist, his voice dropping into that pathetic, desperate growl bullies use when they aren't getting their way. He started complaining that she was making him look like a jerk. Newsflash, buddy. You don't need her help for that. You've got a natural talent for it. Leah didn't take it lying down, though. She ripped her arm away and told him to eat his imaginary noodles by himself. That's when the trash really came out. Hyuntae started barking about how she forgot her place and started looking down on him just because he was nice for 5 seconds. And then she landed a slap across his face that was so crisp, I felt it in my own soul. I was tucked away in a corner, watching this domestic disaster unfold, and my brain was short-circuiting. My good boy side was screaming to call the cops, to file a report, to do things by the book. But then I looked at my clothes. I looked at the Mafia air I was supposed to be. I needed to do something, and I needed to do it now. I looked down and saw a pebble. Just a small, insignificant rock. I remembered the story of David and Goliath. David didn't call the police. He used a stone and some physics. I figured if it worked for a shepherd boy, it could work for a guy in a midlife crisis at 17. I lined up the shot. I channeled all my frustration, all my anger about Soin, all the years of repressed rage into my arm, expecting a legendary knockout. Instead, I proved that my aim is about as reliable as my stamina on a Saturday night. I missed the villain by a mile and sniped the girl right in the forehead. I'm a literal mastermind, turning a rescue mission into a lifelong medical bill in record time. If she survives the brain swelling, she's definitely not calling me hero. She's calling a lawyer. She screamed, and for a second, I just wanted to melt into the pavement and disappear. Hyuntae started looking around, screaming for whatever coward was throwing rocks to come out and fight. I didn't have time to be embarrassed. I grabbed a second stone. No time to feel guilty about the brain damage I just gave her. I grabbed a second stone, praying for a miracle. Bullseye, right between Hyuntae's eyes. Perfect. Now they can share a room in the ICU and a lawyer in the morning. The guy wobbled for a second like a glitching NPC before his knees gave out and he hit the dirt. In the mess of him falling, I didn't even feel the Azure Dragon ring slip from my pocket. It hit the ground as a lost cause while I bolted out of the shadows, grabbed Leah's hand, and told her we needed to move. We ran. And when I say we ran, I mean I was prepared to put 10 kilometers between us and that apartment complex. She was complaining the whole time, asking why I was there and why her head was bleeding, but I just kept pulling. I wasn't about to let Broccoli Head wake up and start a round 2. Eventually, we stopped in a park or some quiet corner to catch our breath. Leah was exhausted, slumped over and checking her forehead and her phone screen like she was looking for a career-ending scar. I slipped away for a second, found a pharmacy, and came back with some bandages. I handed them over, trying to keep up my new cold persona, but I probably just looked like a confused waiter. She asked if this was my way of apologizing for the rock to the face incident. I mumbled an apology, admitting I didn't mean to hit her. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. She introduced herself as Leah and asked for my name. When I told her I was Junho, the same guy from her class, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. She called me lame, or at least, she said the old me was a walking disaster. I guess my angel act was even more transparently pathetic than I thought. I tried to defend myself, insisting that I'm actually a very dangerous, very bad person now. She just stared at the bandages and asked why a bad person would go out of their way to buy medical supplies for a girl he just met. The logic was flawless. I felt like a failure of a villain already. We started talking about why she was even hanging out with a guy like Hyuntae. She admitted she wasn't exactly in love with him. She was just attracted to that free spirit vibe, that bad boy energy. But she realized too late that Hyuntae wasn't a rebel. He was just a predator. I told her she should report him to the police, especially since he tried to force her into his place. But then, the reality of school social hierarchies hit. She didn't want the drama. She didn't want people talking about her failed date with a bully. Plus, she pointed out that if she reported him, I'd get in trouble for the whole assault with a deadly pebble thing. She had a point. She looked at me, her long hair blowing in the wind, and for a second, she didn't look like a delinquent. She looked tired. She asked me to keep everything a secret. She said she didn't want to be any worse than she already was. I watched her walk away, realizing that the world of bad boys and bad girls wasn't nearly as cool as the movies made it look. It was just messy. I walked back into that school, feeling like I had just conquered a small country. But the reality check hit me the second I stepped into the cafeteria. Apparently, my bad boy transformation, complete with gold chains and enough bracelets to make a jewelry store jealous, didn't make me look like a mafia boss to everyone. To some of my classmates, I just looked like a total weirdo who had lost his mind over the weekend. Classic. I sat there, staring at a spoonful of rice like it held the secrets to the universe, and just grunted whatever, I'll go. I tried to sound cold, but my friends weren't having it. They swarmed me, demanding to know why I had turned into a walking glitter bomb in a single day. They told me I looked exactly like him, the very trash bag I was trying to out-trash. And honestly, hearing that was like music to my ears. I slammed my hands on the table, standing up with a grin that probably made me look more unhinged than cool, and asked them if I really looked that corrupt. I told them that was the goal. My friends actually started drooling. Literally, a piece of fishball fell out of one guy's mouth because they couldn't process the angel of class 452 talking about wanting to be a degenerate. They tried to give me a better role model. They suggested I try to be like Dongseo. Now, Dongseo is the real deal. He's the guy who's actually strong but doesn't feel the need to bark like a chihuahua every 5 seconds. But I thought about Soin. I thought about how she was hanging onto Hyuntae's arm, and I felt this surge of pure, stubborn stupidity. I gripped my spoon so hard, my knuckles turned white, telling them I didn't want to be strong and silent. I wanted to be a jerk. I needed to be exactly the kind of bad boy Soin was currently obsessed with. Suddenly, a tray clattered down next to mine. It was Leah, the girl I had just saved, with a rock to the forehead. She pulled out a chair with enough confidence to occupy a small moon, and asked if she could sit there. I just sat there, frozen, watching her eat like she owned the table. The rest of the guys went silent. You could hear a pin drop in that cafeteria. My friends were mentally screaming, wondering why the school's resident, scary girl, was suddenly lunch buddies with the former saint. When they asked what I had done to help her, I panicked. I stood up, grabbed my tray, and told them it was nothing important before making a break for it. I couldn't have them finding out about the Stone Age rescue mission. Leah just followed me, shouting my name while my friends cried into their rice because they weren't the ones getting chased by a pretty delinquent. I looked over at Soin, who was watching this whole scene from across the room. Her face was a mask of confusion and something else I couldn't quite name. It felt like a win, but a hollow one. I ducked into the bathroom to pull myself together. Looking in the mirror, I realized I couldn't go see the teacher looking like a budget pimp. I started stripping off the gold chains and the fake bandages Uncle Kisan had applied for vibe. I was stuffing everything into my pockets, worrying about whether I'd get my points deducted or if the teacher would actually kill me for my first offense. Then I went to pull off my rings, and my heart stopped. The Azure Dragon ring was gone. I checked every pocket. I checked the floor. Nothing. My forehead broke out in a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the gym. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was a gift from my bald-headed uncle, a guy who looked like he could crush a bowling ball with one hand. He told me that ring was given to him by the big boss himself on his coming-of-age day. He told me he wanted it back only on the day he died, so he could take it to the grave. If I lost that ring, I wasn't just a bad boy, I was a dead boy. I sprinted back to the classroom, ignoring everyone, praying it had just fallen under my desk. I was frantic, crawling on the floor, begging the universe for one bit of luck. That's when the universe decided to laugh in my face. A boot slammed into my side, sending me sprawling across the floor. "Don't get in my way," a voice growled. It was Hyuntae. He was standing there, looking like he was in a foul mood, probably still feeling the sting of that pebble I'd gifted his forehead. He didn't even recognize me on the ground. he just saw a target. He started kicking me over and over, calling me pathetic. My stamina was a joke. 10 years of being an angel meant I had the combat capability of a wet noodle. I just lay there, taking the hits, while Soin watched from the doorway, too terrified to move. Hyuntae was screaming at me to just die, his face twisted in this ugly, subhuman rage. I was ready to pass out when a voice cut through the room like a blade. Hyuntae. Leah was standing at the door, arms crossed, looking bored. She told him that if he wanted to hit someone, he should try hitting her instead of taking his anger out on an innocent guy. Hyuntae's eyes lit up with this predatory glee. He started hurling insults and demanded to know who the guy was that helped her escape earlier. He grabbed her by the collar, hoisting her up, threatening to break her face if she didn't talk. She didn't blink. She just told him to go to hell. But then she got smart. She realized Hyuntae only fears one thing, a bigger predator. She looked at him and told him that if he wanted revenge, he should go talk to Songdong-seo. She pointed at a guy sleeping at the back of the class, a guy who looked like a dormant volcano. The room went cold. Hyuntae's bravado vanished instantly. His hands started shaking. He looked at Leah, then at the sleeping giant, then at the rest of the class, who were all watching to see if he'd actually do it. He knew that if he backed down now, his top dog status was over. He was trapped by his own ego. He swallowed hard, walked over to Dongseo's desk, and kicked it hard. The entire class gasped. Leah looked like she couldn't believe her bluff actually worked. Song Dong-seo slowly sat up, looking like he'd been disturbed during a very important dream about peace and quiet. He looked at Hyuntae and asked if he'd finally lost his mind. Hyuntae, using every ounce of fake courage he had, asked Dong-seo if he was the one who helped Leah. Dong-seo looked at the floor, saw me lying there half-conscious and bleeding, and then looked at Leah. He seemed to put the pieces together. He dug out his ear, looked Hyuntae dead in the eye, and told him, "Yeah, it was me. What are you gonna do about it?" It was a total power move, but Hyuntae wasn't as stupid as he looks. He stared at Dongseo's massive frame and realized the guy who hit him with the pebble was way smaller. He actually had the balls to grab Dongseo's collar and scream about being lied to. Bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Spoiler, it didn't. Dongseo just grabbed Hyuntae's hand with a grip that probably turned his bones into powder. One squeeze, and Hyuntae was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane, whimpering for him to let go. The bully tried to save face by shouting some empty threats as he backed away, barking at the rest of the class to stop staring, but the damage was done. He looked like a clown who just realized the circus was on fire. But then, the universe decided I hadn't suffered enough today. Hyuntae stomped over, eyeing my bad boy makeover like a confused pit bull. He yanked my head up by the hair, ranting that I looked exactly like the guy who stoned him earlier, but I wasn't listening. My heart hit the floor as I spotted it, my Azure Dragon ring. It was sitting right there on Hyuntae's finger. The idiot didn't even realize he'd picked up a legendary Mafia artifact. He probably just thought it looked shiny. He laughed in my face, tossed me back onto the floor, and walked out, leaving me in a state of absolute, pure panic. The door slammed shut, and the silence in the room was heavy. Leah was the first one to move, rushing to my side and trying to get me to the nurse's office. She was actually worried about me. Meanwhile, Soin, my childhood friend, just stood there, biting her lip, looking like she wanted to help, but was too paralyzed by her own life choices. The rest of the class was whispering about whether Leah and I were dating, wondering how the angel had turned into a delinquent and found a girl in less than 24 hours. Honestly, the irony was dripping off the walls, but I couldn't care less about the gossip. I pushed myself up, ignoring the pain, and thanked Dongseo and Leah. I told them I could handle myself, but inside, I was screaming. I limped out of the room like a zombie, my brain on a loop. The ring is on Hyuntae's hand. I am so dead. I walked home feeling like a ghost, wondering how the hell I was going to explain this to my uncles. I stood outside the front gate for what felt like an hour, sweating through my shirt, trying to think of a lie that wouldn't end with me being buried in a basement. I finally pushed the door open, and the usual "Welcome home, young master" chant went up, but it died out instantly. The goons saw my face. They saw the bruises, the footprints on my back, and the general aura of a guy who had been used as a human hacky sack. Suddenly, the house went from 0 to World War III. My scar-faced uncle was vibrating with rage, shouting that this was a declaration of war against the mighty syndicate. He was ready to call in the entire organization to burn the school down. Even Uncle Kisan, the bald one who gave me the ring, was glowing with a terrifying red aura, holding a weapon and demanding the name of the guy who touched me. I had to physically hold them back before they turned a lunchroom dispute into a straight-up crime scene. Luckily, Uncle Youngsu walked in and told everyone to chill. I thought, thank God, a voice of reason. But then he dropped the real bombshell. He looked me in the eye and told the goons that they weren't allowed to interfere. He said I was the heir to the organization, and I had to fight my own battles. He looked at me with this sharp, predator-like intensity and led me into a full-blown war council meeting. Picture this, a room full of professional killers, hitmen, and mob bosses sitting around a table to discuss a high school bully. It was absurd. Uncle Youngsu asked me if the guy who hit me was a good fighter. I told him he was just a bully, not a pro athlete. The scar-faced guy laughed, saying that meant I just needed to hit him harder. Then Uncle Youngsu asked if I'd followed the first strike rule. I admitted I didn't actually hit him with my fists, but I did snipe him with a rock. The room did a total 180. The disappointment turned into pure hype. They were actually impressed that I'd used a primitive weapon for my first act of violence. But Uncle Youngsu slammed his hand on the table, silencing everyone. He told me the reason I got trashed today was simple. I don't know how to fight. He told me that as the future leader of the mighty syndicate, I needed to be trained, and they were the best in the business. Then came the training philosophy. Uncle Youngsu smiled, which is always a bad sign, and told me that since I was a beginner, I needed to build a habit of winning. How? By beating up people even weaker than me. My jaw hit the floor. I tried to argue that picking on the weak was, objectively terrible, but Uncle Kisan backed him up. He told me that as I get stronger, the pool of people weaker than me will grow until I'm at the top of the food chain. They told me I just had to trust them. Looking at their faces, I realized I didn't have much of a choice. My angel wings weren't just clipped, they were being deep fried. The next morning, I was a nervous wreck. I was heading to school, trying to keep my bad boy mask on, when I ran into Uncle Kisan at the door. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I thought he'd noticed the missing ring, but he just wanted to tell me my shirt wasn't tucked in properly. He helped me fix my clothes. Looking at me with so much pride, it actually made me feel guilty. I ran out of there before I could spill the beans, wondering how the hell I was going to get that ring back from Hyuntae. As I was sprinting to school, I saw her, the old lady who collects scrap metal. My first instinct was to drop everything and help her. But then I remembered Uncle Youngsu's voice. A real bad person only acts when there's a profit. Never help for free. I felt like I was being torn in half. My legs were shaking, my teeth were gritting, and I was trying to force myself to just walk past her. But of course, she saw me. She smiled, calling out my name and telling me I was late for school. I didn't say a word. I just turned and bolted, running as fast as my legs would carry me, crying like a baby the whole way. I could feel the angel inside me screaming, clawing at my chest, begging me to go back. I wanted to help her so bad it physically hurt. Could I really do this? Could I actually become the degenerate I needed to be? Suddenly, the universe decided to test me again. I heard a groan, a heavy, exhausted sound that screamed, I need a high schooler to carry my heavy burdens. I broke out in a cold sweat, slowly rotating my head like a character in a horror movie, praying it wasn't what I thought. Naturally, it was an old man, drenched in sweat, lugging something that looked like it weighed as much as a small car. He looked up, recognized me, and asked why I was late for school. The old me would have grabbed that load before he even finished his sentence. The new me, I just stood there, biting my lip until it nearly bled. He asked if something was wrong, if I was hesitating about something. I didn't say a word. I just turned my back on him and sprinted away like a coward. I was mentally screaming apologies to the man as I ran, feeling like the absolute scum of the earth. Why was the road to school suddenly a gauntlet of moral dilemmas? It felt like the world was conspiring to keep me a saint. I checked my watch. I was officially late for the first time in 10 years. My heart was racing, partly from the run, partly from the fear of being scolded. Then, a voice behind me made me jump nearly out of my skin. My first thought, please don't be another elderly person with a heavy box. If it was, I knew my resolve would crumble. I turned around and felt a wave of pure relief. It was just another student. I actually clasped my hands together in a prayer of thanks that I didn't have to ignore a senior citizen for the third time today. I was so out of it that I started following the other students across the street without looking. Suddenly, a massive truck roared toward me, tires screeching as the driver slammed on the brakes just inches from my legs. The driver leaned out and started barking at me, asking if I had a death wish. My angel instinct took over instantly. I bowed my head and started stuttering apologies, but then I froze. Why was I apologizing? The light was red. These other bad kids were crossing anyway, like they owned the asphalt, and I had just followed them like a sheep. One of the delinquents looked back and laughed, calling it interesting that I was apologizing for something so minor. He spat on the ground with zero effort, looking like a total rebel. I thought to myself, Hyuntae would do that, wouldn't he? The light turned green, and a friend behind me urged me to hurry up or we'd be late. I told him to go on ahead. I had a business to take care of. I stood there at the crosswalk, staring at the red light, counting down the seconds in my head. 3, 2, 1. The don't walk sign started flashing. The alarm was beeping, and I forced my legs to move. I ran straight into the middle of oncoming traffic, cars swerving and honking, drivers screaming that I was a lunatic. I reached the other side and looked up at the sky, feeling a bizarre sense of pride. I had finally committed a crime. A very small, traffic-based crime, but a crime nonetheless. Then came the next step in the bad boy manual, the spit. I saw that delinquent do it, so I tried to follow suit. I turned my head, gathered my courage, and let it fly. It was a disaster. Instead of a cool, effortless projectile, it just kind of hung there. I spent the next 30 seconds frantically wiping my mouth and looking around to make sure nobody saw how pathetic I looked. I realized being a bad boy required a lot more practice than the movies let on. But hey, I was making progress. I was feeling pretty good until I saw Soin. I was about to call out her name when I saw who she was with, Hyuntae. He had his arm around her, laughing, whispering things in her ear as they walked toward the school. I ducked into an alley, hiding like a stray cat, feeling like an absolute loser. Seeing her look that happy with a guy like him gave me the fuel I needed. If she wanted a monster, I'd give her a monster. I wandered into a deeper alleyway and stumbled upon a scene that would have normally made my angel blood boil. 3 girls, led by Leah, were cornering a male student named Sango, shaking him down for cash. When Leah saw me, she stopped. Sango looked at me with hope in his eyes, calling out my name like I was his savior. The 2 other girls started barking at me to keep walking if I didn't want to get hurt. Sango begged me to help him. One of the girls looked at Leah, confused as to why she wasn't saying anything, but Leah was just busy applying lip gloss, acting like she didn't care. I stood there, my internal uncles whispering in my ear. I walked forward, the girls trembling as I approached, with a cold, dead stare. Sango was practically crying, thanking me for coming to his rescue. Then, I opened my mouth. How much do you have? The silence that followed was deafening. Sango's eyes nearly popped out of his head. The delinquent girls looked like they'd just seen a penguin fly. I was sweating through my shirt, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I leaned in close to Sango and demanded he hand over every cent. If you're missing even 1 coin, you're dead, I growled. Behind a nearby crate, Uncle Kisan was watching the whole thing. The bald, terrifying mobster was actually crying. He was so moved by me shaking down a student that he was sobbing like a baby, thinking about how much I was growing up. He recognized the line I used. It was one of the ones he taught me. He was mentally telling my father that the heir was finally becoming a man. Back in the alley, I snatched the 40,000 won from Sango's trembling hands. The delinquent girls were stunned. One of them called me a real man, clearly impressed by the sudden heel turn. They started talking about how cool I was, and for a second, I felt the rush. Is this what they like? Is this the bad boy energy someone is addicted to? Sango walked away, but he had this weird look on his face. I realized he probably thought I was just pretending to rob him so I could save him from the girls and give the money back later. He still thought I was an angel. Little did he know, I was holding that 40,000 won and wondering how the hell I was going to divide it. The brown-haired girl in the group threw her arm around my shoulder, comparing me to Hyuntae. She suggested we go to a PC bang and split the loot. I handed 10,000 won to Leah, but she just stared at me with this deep, soul-crushing disappointment. She didn't say a word. She just turned and walked away, ignoring her friends' calls to go eat. I stood there, the stolen money feeling like lead in my pocket, wondering why the one person who knew the real me looked like she wanted to vomit. Meanwhile, Uncle Kisan was still lurking in the shadows, feeling like a proud parent. But as he was walking away, he accidentally bumped into someone. It was Hyuntae. The bully started barking at the old man, asking him if he was blind. Kisan's veins were bulging. He was a heartbeat away from erasing this kid from existence. But then, he saw it, the azure dragon ring on Hyuntae's finger. Uncle Kisan froze. He assumed that since Hyuntae was wearing the ring, he must be my best friend. He figured I had lent it to him. He swallowed his rage, thinking the situation was complicated, while Hyuntae continued to mock him, calling him a bald loser and telling him to get lost. Uncle Kisan let him go, praying that this kid was actually my friend, because if he wasn't, there wouldn't be enough left of Hyuntae to bury. I finally made it to school, only to be intercepted by my homeroom teacher. I bowed. Habit is a reflex, after all. and he dragged me to his office. He looked at me with this mixture of pity and frustration. He reminded me that I was supposed to be the student council president next semester. He asked what the hell happened to the boy he used to know. Apparently, being the school's angel comes with a lot of baggage, because my homeroom teacher looked at me like I was the biggest disappointment since unsalted fries. He adjusted his glasses, his tone dripping with that "I'm not mad, just disappointed" energy, and told me he wanted to see my father. That was a problem. A massive, potentially school-leveling problem. If my father, the literal head of a criminal empire, walked into this office, the teacher would probably have a heart attack before he even finished the first sentence. I immediately shot that idea down, claiming my dad was far away and asking if an uncle could come instead. The other teachers were whispering like a bunch of schoolgirls, shocked that Angel Junho actually had the gall to talk back. Eventually, my teacher sighed and agreed. An uncle would do. I walked out of there feeling like I'd just dodged a bullet. Then I ran into my friend, Dongwoo, in the hallway. He'd been waiting for me, looking like a nervous wreck because he thought the teacher had executed me. I tried to play it cool, telling him the teacher just wanted a parent-teacher conference. He asked if bringing an uncle was really a better idea than bringing my parents. I just gave him a look. Trust me, compared to my dad, any of my uncles were saints. Dongwoo then tried to tease me about Leah, but I shut that down quick. We had bigger fish to fry. When I got home and announced that a teacher wanted to meet an uncle, I accidentally started a civil war. These guys were fighting over a school meeting like it was the last seat on a lifeboat. They were shouting about tripping the guardian switch and how they'd waited 10 years for this moment. It was pathetic, honestly. They decided to settle it the only way men of their stature do: rock, paper, scissors. Uncle Yangsu, the smart one, tried to cheat by declaring he'd play rock, but it backfired. Uncle Kisan, the bald powerhouse, threw out a rock against 2 scissors. He won. He started screaming and dancing like he just won the lottery, while the others slumped over in absolute defeat. Uncle Yangsu was so salty he actually smacked the back of Kisan's head for being a gloating winner. He told me not to worry, that Kisan would handle it, and sent me off to bed. I watched my bald uncle literally vibrating with excitement and prayed the school would still be standing by noon tomorrow. The next morning, I walked downstairs and almost walked right back up. Uncle Kisan was ready. He was wearing jeans so tight they looked painted on, and a shirt so short his tattoos were basically waving hello to everyone. He looked like the final boss of a back alley gang from a 90s anime. He was grinning like a maniac, ready to represent the family. I was dying of embarrassment before we even hit the sidewalk. As we walked, we ran into a couple of other colleagues of his, scary-looking guys with tattoos. They bowed so low, their foreheads almost hit the concrete, shouting, "Greetings, big brother." It was a total reality check for me. These guys weren't just uncles, they were actual legends in the underworld. Uncle Kisan decided that since we had time, he'd give me a masterclass in Bad Boy 101, Lesson 1, The Spit. He told me it's all in the tongue, a precise flick to show total disrespect for the ground you walk on. He demonstrated a perfect high-velocity projectile that hit the pavement with a satisfying thwack. I tried to follow his lead. It was a disaster. I just ended up with drool all over my chin, looking like a broken water fountain. He patted my shoulder, telling me I just needed more practice, but I felt like a total fraud. Lesson 2, The Walk. He told me I needed to walk with authority. He puffed out his chest, arched his back, and started doing this wide-stanced, bow-legged stroll that made it look like he was carrying 2 invisible watermelons under his arms. He called it the manly stride. I imitated him, and suddenly, we were 2 guys walking down a public street, looking like we both had a severe case of diaper rash. We reached the school gates, and the whispering started immediately. Students were staring, wondering why the angel was walking with a guy who looked like he just stepped out of a prison yard. I was trying to hide my face behind my hand, praying Soin wouldn't see me. I felt like a circus attraction. Then, Kisan dropped a question that made my stomach do a backflip. He asked if I was still taking care of the Azure Dragon ring he'd given me. I lied through my teeth, telling him it was safely tucked away in my room. The air around him suddenly got heavy. His face went dark, his veins bulging. He's not stupid. He knew I was lying, and he knew I'd probably lost it to Hyuntae, but he didn't call me out. He just forced a smile and told me to keep moving. We marched into the school, a walking disaster of bad boy energy and family secrets. I was praying to every god I didn't believe in that my uncle wouldn't accidentally start a massacre before the first bell. Leah was staring at me. She was probably wondering why I was escorted by a man who looked like he'd been rejected from a Yakuza casting call for being too scary. I did the only logical thing. I covered my face like a disgraced celebrity and scurried past her. I pointed my uncle toward the office, and the man just grunted, marching off with enough final boss energy to make the floorboards groan. I stood there like a statue, my heart doing a drum solo against my ribs. Inside the lion's den, my uncle didn't just knock. He pounded on the door like he was serving a high-stakes eviction notice. Every teacher in that room stopped breathing. My homeroom teacher, Kim Seong-hoon, a man who clearly peaked in the 90s, looked up and saw a bald man in a skin-tight shirt that was doing a heroic job of containing his muscles. The gossip mill in the office went into overdrive. I could practically hear the teachers whispering about whether they should call the SWAT team or just hand over their lunch money. But Teacher Kim, he decided today was the day he'd play the hero. He adjusted his glasses, told his colleagues to trust his 10 years of experience, and invited my uncle to the counseling room. He thought he was being cool. He thought he was handling a delinquent's guardian. He had no idea he was sitting across from a man who considers aggravated assault a light cardio workout. They sat down with some tea, and Kim started his pitch. He told my uncle that I'd been changing negatively, and that my grades were slipping. He mentioned I was supposed to be the student council president, and that I was going downhill. My uncle's reaction was pure gold. He leaned in, his face looking like a tectonic plate about to shift, and asked if Junho was becoming a bad student. Poor Teacher Kim was so terrified he nearly blew his own toupee off. He started backpedaling, stuttering that I was still exemplary. But my uncle slammed his hand on the table, making the teacups perform a synchronized jump. He demanded to know if I was a delinquent or not. Kim, realizing that yes was the only answer that wouldn't result in him being folded like a lawn chair, quickly agreed. Yes, Junho is a bad student. Very bad. The worst. My uncle actually looked proud. He'd achieved his goal. His nephew was officially a bad boy in the eyes of the law. But then, his predator instincts kicked in. He asked if there had been any extortion or theft at the school lately. Kim denied it, swearing the school was a bastion of peace, but my uncle wasn't buying it. He remembered the footprint on my back. He remembered my lie about the ring being in my room. He knew. He realized I'd been robbed, and I could practically see the Kill Bill siren going off in his head. He finished his tea, thanked the teacher with a terrifying grin, and told him to take care of Junho before walking out. Teacher Kim collapsed into his chair the second the door closed, probably vowing to never call my parents ever again. But my uncle wasn't done. He decided to go on a little scouting mission. He marched toward my classroom, his bald head reflecting the fluorescent lights like a beacon of doom. He was looking for the dog who dared to touch the family heir. He saw a guy with a familiar-looking back and grabbed him, ready to snap him like a twig, only to realize it was some random kid who had nothing to do with anything. He apologized with a bow that probably gave the kid a heart attack and kept moving. He wanted to find Hyuntae. He wanted to turn that bully into a grease spot on the linoleum. But then, he remembered the prime directive. Uncle Yangsu had forbidden anyone from interfering in my war. He gritted his teeth, his face turning a shade of purple that shouldn't exist in nature, and forced himself to leave. He wasn't going to ruin my growth as a leader, but he made a mental note that if I didn't handle Hyuntae soon, he was going to come back with a bulldozer. Meanwhile, the trash king himself, Hyuntae, was sitting on a crate behind the school, admiring his new loot. He was staring at my azure dragon ring like it was the One Ring from Mordor. He had his little cronies with him, and they were busy appraising it on their phones. These idiots actually thought it was worth about 200,000 won. Hyuntae was laughing, thinking he'd hit the jackpot. He'd taken a pebble to the face and gotten enough money for a down payment on a motorcycle. He told his friends he was going to sell it as fast as possible, practically drooling over the thought of his new scooter. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. He was holding an heirloom of a national crime syndicate, a ring that probably cost more than his entire house, and he was planning to pawn it for a bike. Back in the classroom, I was a nervous wreck. I was sitting at my desk, sweating through my uniform, wondering if my uncle had successfully navigated the parent-teacher conference without being arrested. My friend Dongwoo was looking at me like I was about to explode, asking me if I was okay. Then, my teacher walked into the classroom, looking like he'd just survived a 3-hour interrogation with a hungry shark. He was sweating. His eyes were darting everywhere except toward me, and he told the class to settle down with the voice of a man who had lost his will to live. I was sitting there, vibrating with anxiety, wondering if Uncle Kisan had accidentally threatened to turn the faculty lounge into a parking lot. Every time I tried to catch the teacher's eye, he'd swerve his gaze like I was a Medusa in a cheap school uniform. That was the confirmation. My bald, tattooed uncle definitely did something unhinged. My brain started playing a highlight reel of potential disasters. Did he show the teacher his collection? Did he accidentally drop a weapon? I couldn't take it. My head was throbbing with the kind of pain you only get when your family is an active threat to your social life. I did the only logical thing a bad boy does. I raised my hand to go to the bathroom, the universal signal for, I need to go handle a mental breakdown. The teacher looked at me, heard my voice, and for a second, I saw his soul leave his body. He probably remembered my uncle's polite request to look after me. He waved me out of the room with a shaky hand, like he was granting me a royal pardon. Even my friend Dongwoo could smell the desperation on me, whispering that something was definitely going down. I ducked into the hallway, whipped out my phone, and dialed Uncle Kisan. If I had known bringing a professional mobster to a parent-teacher conference would be this messy, I would have just asked Uncle Yangsu to show up and act normal. I put the phone to my ear, but what I heard on the other end wasn't a quiet office. It was a literal carnival. Back at the manor, these absolute lunatics were throwing a congratulations on being a delinquent party. I could hear them cheering, hanging up banners, and probably popping champagne, because the teacher finally acknowledged me as a problem student. My bald uncle picked up the phone, sounding way too cheerful for a man who just traumatized an educator. He told me he handled everything, and that I shouldn't worry my pretty little head about it. Before I could ask what handling everything meant in Mafia speak, Uncle Yangsu snatched the phone away. He didn't care about the party. He only cared about my training. He asked if I'd forgotten his lesson about the habit of winning. He told me that today was the day. I needed to find someone weaker than me and exert my dominance. He wasn't asking, he was giving a command. He told me to find a victim immediately, and then hung up before I could even process the fact that my family was officially encouraging me to become a middle management bully. I stood there in the hallway, the phone still warm in my hand, feeling the weight of 10 years of being a good guy, dying a slow, painful death. Fine. If this is what it takes to get my life back, I'll do it. I decided to start scanning the hallway like I was playing a high-stakes RPG. I saw 2 guys walking toward me. Level 3. Level 2. Nope. Even in my bad boy gear, they looked like they could fold me into a suitcase. I saw another guy. Level 5. He had shoulders wider than my future prospects. Even my own friends were technically higher level than me in a fistfight. I ended up in the bathroom, splashing water on my face, trying to find a spark of villainy in the mirror. I punched the wall, which hurt a lot more than the movies led me to believe, and cursed my genetic luck. How am I the son of a legendary crime lord when I'm the lowest level mob in the entire school? Suddenly, the door swung open and in walked Song Dong-seo, level 70. The guy had muscles on his muscles, cupping his sleeves like he was about to bench press the entire building. He asked me to move so he could wash his hands, and I moved so fast I practically phased through the floor. Level 70 is no joke. I stood there watching his massive back, wondering how I was supposed to be a pillar of the organization when guys like this existed. I was about to give up on the whole bullying the weak thing when the universe handed me a golden opportunity on a silver platter. In walked Sengo, the kid I had robbed earlier, level 0. He was the human equivalent of a participation trophy. He walked up to me with that same Angel Junho look in his eyes and asked if I could give him his 40,000 won back. He actually thought our earlier encounter was a performance to save him from the girls. A dark, twisted smile started creeping across my face. Found him. The victim. Sengo was looking at me like I was his savior, but my brain was busy calculating my first win. He was telling me how great my acting was, not realizing that I was evaluating his collar for a good grip. I didn't say a word. I just reached out, grabbed his shirt, and hoisted him up. Poor Sengo's face went from hopeful to traumatized in record time. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and screamed at him to be the sacrifice for my first victory. I wound up a punch, my hand shaking with the sheer effort of trying to be a jerk. I was ready to launch it, ready to officially cross the line into bad boy territory. Sango was shrieking, calling out for Dongseo to save him. And what did the level 70 legend do? He just stood there. He watched me struggle with my own conscience for a few seconds, then calmly walked out of the bathroom and shut the door. He didn't care. He was letting me do my thing. Now it was just me and Sango. I had him cornered. I had my fist cocked back. I just needed to punch him once. Just one little hit, and the angel would be dead forever. I kept repeating just one punch in my head like a mantra, but the good boy software in my brain was corrupted. It wouldn't let the command through. My grip loosened. My arm fell. I couldn't do it. I'm a failure, even at being a piece of trash. Sango didn't stick around to console me. He scrambled for the door, screaming that I was evil, and that the angel Junho was actually a demon in disguise. He ran out of there, leaving me alone in the silence of the bathroom. I should have been happy. I had achieved the goal. A student officially called me a bad person, but as I stood there, I didn't feel like a Mafia heir. I felt empty. I slumped down to the floor, my knees hitting the tiles, feeling the weight of 10 years of effort evaporating into nothing. Was it really this easy to lose everything? All those hours helping grandmas, all those smiles I forced when I wanted to scream, gone because I scared a level 0 kid in a bathroom. I remembered what Uncle Youngsu told me. Becoming a good person is hard, but becoming bad is as easy as turning your hand over. He was right, and that's the scariest part. I was standing there, clutching my chest, like I was having a midlife crisis at 17. My heart was hammering against my ribs, sounding like a drum solo in an empty room. I realized then that punching someone isn't as easy as the uncles made it look. My brain was a mess of angel guilt and mafia ambition. I kept hearing Sango's voice calling me a demon. A demon. Honestly, it's a step up from being called boring, but it still tasted like ash in my mouth. I tried to convince myself that this was the first step, the first hurdle. I was becoming the bad boy Soen wanted, even if it meant turning my soul into a junkyard. I'd spent 10 years trying to win her heart with kindness, and look where that got me. If she wants a jerk, I'll be the biggest jerk in the zip code. I've lived my whole life as a performance. I can play this role too. I walked back into the classroom, and the vibe was toxic. Everyone was huddled around Sango, who was sobbing like he'd just seen a puppy get kicked. He looked at me and pointed, calling me a monster. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, letting the hate wash over me. Then, Soin approached me. She looked at me with those judgmental eyes, asking how I could almost punch Sango, the kid I've spent years protecting. She was practically begging me to tell her it was a lie, to give her back the angel Junho she thought she knew. But for the first time in my life, I snapped at her. I told her to stop talking. I looked at her, really looked at her, and pointed out the irony. She was the one who said she hated messy uniforms and heavy makeup, yet there she was, looking like a delinquent's accessory. I even called out the couple slippers she was wearing with Hyuntae. I told her she looked perfect for her new lifestyle, and told her I was skipping class, asking her to cover for me with the teacher. I was done being her safety net. I turned to leave, but the door swung open and hit me with a reality check named Hyuntae. He didn't even say hello. He just started barking about me being too close to Soin. I tried to handle it the civilized way, suggesting we go somewhere and talk, but Hyuntae wasn't interested in a debate. He laughed, telling his two goons to hold me down. They each grabbed an arm, pinning me like a bug to a board, while Hyuntae wound up a punch. He guessed I had a crush on Soin and decided to let his fists do the talking. He buried a punch deep into my stomach. My eyes practically rolled into the back of my head, and I felt my lunch trying to make a second appearance. He leaned in, whispering that he was left-handed, like that made the pain any more artistic. I was gasping for air, trailing spit on the floor, when Soin finally found her voice and told him to stop. Hyuntae didn't like that. He turned on her, spitting every insult in his limited vocabulary and accusing us of having something going on behind his back. He actually raised his hand to slap her. He was going to hit the girl I'd spent a decade cherishing. That was the breaking point. The angel didn't just leave. He was incinerated by the demon. I let out a roar that probably shattered windows, calling him a piece of human garbage. Even Dongseo, who was trying to nap at the back of the class, jumped up like someone had fired a gun. I looked at Hyuntae with eyes that were probably glowing red at this point, telling him that if he touched Soin, he was a dead man walking. Soin looked at me like I'd grown a second head. She couldn't believe those words were coming out of my mouth. Hyuntae just laughed, mocking my tough guy act while I was still being held by his goons. But while he was laughing, my brain was flashing back to every rejection, every moment I'd wasted being nice. I decided right then that I was going to break him. I saw Hyuntae's arm wind up again. I tried to time it. I thought, this is it, my first real fight. I threw a kick and whiffed so hard I felt the embarrassment coming. But while my leg was still hanging in the air, Hyuntae's head snapped back like he'd been hit by a truck. I genuinely wondered if I developed psychic powers, until I realized Dongseo had just delivered a freight train of a punch right over my shoulder. I hadn't unlocked a secret ability. I was just a human shield, with a leg up. Hyuntae was clutching his nose, blood spraying everywhere, screaming at Dongseo for being a lunatic. Dongseo didn't say a word. He just wound up again. Another punch nosedived into Hyuntae's jaw. The top dog of the school was sent flying across the room, sliding across the floor like a sack of laundry. Hyuntae was a mess, sobbing and asking what he'd ever done to deserve a beatdown from the class legend. Dongseo just sat there, looking at him with total boredom. He told him he hit him because his face was annoying. Dongseo leaned in and whispered the final insult. And by the way, I really hope you're still on your parents' dental plan. One more punch, a literal hammer of a hit, and Hyuntae was out for the count. His face was distorted. His ego was in tatters, and he was twitching on the floor like a bug.